And joining us now is Clare Barber, standing in Douglas East, standing for re-election. A name change, of course, since the last election, but that might confuse a few people. It's been an interesting 5 years for you. I think you've had a pretty good 5 years. I'm not trying to say I'm on your side here or anything, but you seem to have got stuck in. You've got major policies gone through. How do you view it?
I like to think it has been a good 5 years. I mean, there's certainly been a lot that's happened. It's been interesting actually going back over that all now in this process and thinking, oh goodness, I forgot about that or whatever else. And there are just so many elements. But then, as with everything, there's also so much more that needs doing. And I think that's something you have to come to terms with in this role, is you can't do everything at once, because the reality is there's just a finite amount of time and resource.
Did you find that unusual? Because did you think you could go and change the world in the first 5 years?
I think some things I've been frustrated with, absolutely, and the pace of change can be frustrating, and I think that's something that when I've talked to colleagues, that's not I think it's slow and everyone else is thinking it's running at the normal pace. But I also appreciate that the importance of the elements of some of the elements of process, such as consultation. It's really important that we have that dialogue. But there are other times when it just feels like things are unnecessarily slow.
Door knocking, what's your main points that you're putting to people, and then I'll ask in reverse, what are you telling them?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a two-way dialogue, but for me, I think the focus around economic recovery is absolutely imperative, and in amongst that we have affordable housing. Ultimately, if we don't have affordable housing, we're not going to be able to have a thriving economy, because people who are working will leave and people who may have thought to come here won't. So that for me is a key tenet of the economic recovery. I think there's still work to be done around healthcare. That's something that for me has always been a priority. We've made some big first steps in terms of enabling with the formation of Manx Care, but that's not the end position. There's a lot of work still happening within the transformation project and within Manx Care, and how that evolves, and the relationship that DHSC has with Manx Care, because I think we're all on a learning curve in that regard. And
you like the idea of this, though? So more people involved, there's more tiers of people management. Are you okay with all that?
So there shouldn't be.
Oh, okay.
I think for me, there's the people who are contracting out and asking a service to be provided, and then there's people providing a service. I would hope that Manx Care will actually start to see a finessing of some of the roles that I think have been created, that I would question over the last 5, 10, 15 even years.
Because you've been a nurse, so you must have seen all this hierarchy. It must drive you mad. I mean,
and it is frustrating, and I think we need to re-empower the workforce on the shop floor, who know absolutely, and I've always said this, go and speak to your physios, your nurses, your doctors, your housekeepers. They know what the issues are that are happening that affect them, and they know how the care for the patient can be delivered better. No question in my mind that the expertise is the people who are doing this day in, day out, not someone in an office who's looking at a paper-based exercise and thinking, oh, let's move this piece here and this piece there. Yeah, it's just not workable.
Okay, just on with, you said climate change and obviously the housing thing, the usual suspects, I'm guessing here. National or local, you didn't mention the prom at all in there, by the way. Douglas prom. Although, I have to say, you're not living in Douglas East now, you're a married person. Does that even affect you in that sense, you think?
So from my perspective, I'm not living in Douglas East today. I still live in Douglas.
Yeah.
I had a call to make. I married someone who had 2 children who had a bereavement from their own mother, and I felt it wasn't fair to upheave them into my house. So I made a call that it was preferable for me to move to that house. So I live just on the outskirts of Douglas, within Douglas conurbation, certainly.
You still do the prom though, right? Douglas. Yeah. Because you've been on all these committees.
Yeah, I make a point of, I'm walking through the constituency on a daily basis. I'm making a point of being seen talking to people, and I've had a really positive dialogue with people, even at difficult times. And I think, the prom is a great example of that. So I've chaired the scrutiny committee, the Environment and Infrastructure Scrutiny Committee, and we've done interviews about that. And we've done 3 reports on the prom, so looking at the various elements that have failed within the promenade scheme. And I'm certainly not suggesting that there isn't a huge amount of work that needed to go on underground, that is the unseen work. But the process to me was wrong. There was failures around how the project management has worked. There's been challenges about recognising the detriment to businesses, and that just wasn't done quick enough. There was almost it'll be fine, it's only a few years, whereas businesses were already on their knees. And that was also then, for the businesses, wasn't just the promenade, because they'd also had the collapse of Flybe, which had affected the tourism and the hospitality trade. And then subsequently, of course, we've had COVID, which has then also knocked on the prom. So there's been this trinity of things that have come along and caused untold damage. And when you've got someone who's put their life into building up a business that was a thriving business, and suddenly things completely out of their control come along and damage that, it's heartbreaking listening to people who've then taken out loans against the business, personal loans in some cases, or put security against their properties, for example, and they can't now get out of that. They have to keep pushing and wait to the end game. But it's at a huge personal cost. And I think it was very important we made that point clear to DFE, to Treasury, to DOI, all of them, because actually it's not just one department. It needed a union.
Should all be finished as the new Parliament comes in, of course, technically.
I mean,
anyway, let's move on.
I'm not going to get a crystal ball.
Are there things in Douglas East, though, that's, particularly Douglas East? Is there any...
So parking has been a big frustration. That came out strongly around the Eastern Area Plan work, talking about how we can mitigate against more developments that will lead to creation or need for more parking that just isn't there.
You got an idea? I mean, there's no solution, is there? I mean, parking's always going to be an issue.
I think we need to have just a greater awareness of how the parking is. I think I've fought certainly around parking on the promenade, because while I think that the longer term is that we will have a town centre that has less roads that we drive along, and more pedestrianised areas, because actually I think that would make it a more desirable area, and it becomes a lifestyle choice then. So you're living somewhere that perhaps has more cycling lanes, has more ability to walk and do that safely. In the shorter term, if we just ripped all the parking out of Douglas, we'd just kill the town centre. And so for me, you can't do it. There has to be an iterative process, which is what I've been trying to enable.
What do you want to do if you get back in? Have you got any particular things on your list?
I just think there's so many areas. I think certainly, the work that I've done with the scrutiny work and through public accounts has really opened my eyes to some of the areas that I haven't been involved in on a policy creation side, such as DEFA, DOI, and looking at where the challenges are within them. So I think, there's certainly areas I'd like to get involved in.
Clearly, if you get in, you would almost certainly, I guess, be on the shortlist to be a minister of something. So, and I always ask this, your preferences, your thoughts, where you'd best serve, and your skill set.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would like to think that I'm someone who can look across the board at an area and do that without having to know it inside out. And people often say, "Oh, you should take health." I actually don't think that always is the best setup.
But
I think we've had this conversation before. I think I'd have to think carefully about any conflict. Obviously, I am
poison chalice.
It's not about poison chalice. I think you could say that about a number of departments, if I'm honest with you. I don't think DOI is going to be one that people are going to be hopping up and down for. DEFA's got big challenges coming down the road, and there's certainly been some things we've raised, just in the last TIM Ward.
So Minister of what? Which one would we see you as, if you got that call?
If someone was to ask me and ask me and put their trust in me, then I would have to consider the options at that point. But I don't think it's something that I should be going and demanding, to be honest. People can look at me, they can look at the work that I've done over the 5 years, and I hope that will reflect the fact that I'm willing to go into difficult subjects, such as the meat plant, which was obviously something that was pretty controversial at the last TIM Ward, but try and do that and listen. I think listening is a really important part of this.
And you can juggle all this, because it keeps you busy.
It does keep, You're
enjoying it, in that sense. So, you obviously signing up for it, or try and sign up and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think I have something to offer, and I think that's what I always said to you. If I didn't think I was making changes and achieving the things that I wanted to achieve, I just wouldn't do this again, because that's not in my interest and it's not in the public's interest.
I mean, let's just talk about lockdown, because, and the way it's been handled and what you had done, and if you think it was the way handled correctly and your way out of this. Yeah. Briefly.
So, briefly.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, scroll back to the beginning, I obviously voiced frustrations about the fact that we left people from the Isle of Man stuck abroad with no way of getting an income, no way of getting home, and in increasingly questionable circumstances, and appeared to blame them. And for me, that was wrong. When I was listening to the narrative people had, they had tried to get home and they couldn't. So I think to suggest that we should blame people, I still have massive issues with some of the things that happened in the early days of lockdown.
Just moving on.
In terms of
where we
now, I would like to see more mitigations, and I would have liked to have seen them earlier, as in the encouragement of mask wearing. We've got that now, where we're talking about people wearing masks in shops.
Oh, you have it open now, for instance, so as open as we are, which has gone from extreme one thing to the extreme.
I would have liked to have seen the border testing, though, retained for everyone coming in. And the problem is that wasn't on the table. We were in a position where we had this or nothing, no change. So I have pushed, I've written to the Council of Ministers on occasion, I've asked them if they would consider alternatives, consider splitting the regs, bringing one piece, not the next.
Sorry, pushing along time.
Yeah.
Very quickly, who do you want as the next Chief Minister?
I'll be looking forward to reading their manifestos.
Come on, who do you like though?
It's for me, it's not about like. I think
you know what they're going to do.
Well, I don't know what their manifesto priorities will be. That's for me going to be really point of interest. I've been happy working with the two candidates. I mean, there may be others. The two that we've seen who appear to be the front runners.
Okay.
I feel that they both have something to offer, but the manifesto's key.
And a yes or no, would you like to be a Chief Minister yourself at some point?
Yes you always say never, but I'll be honest, I don't see that happening at this point in time.